That's you, Councillor Binks.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, a formal good morning to everybody. A nice cold morning for you. Can we have the apologies, please?
Apologies, Councillor Strang, Councillor Binks.
Okay, thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. I'll carry on to the first item on the agenda, internal audit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Binks. That's myself. This is the usual quarterly report of the audits that have been finalised during the quarter, October to the end of December. You can see from the summary that there are two of the areas that we looked at where we've provided a limited level of assurance. One relates to the new parent pay system that was introduced for school meals income, and the other one is in relation to community asset transfers under the Community Empowerment Act. So I'll not go through the summaries in detail, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes, Chair. Certainly in the community assets transfer, there's I think a lot more detail I think I'd need before I could be happy with the lack of assurance that was able to be given here. Particularly, it's not the report we have in front of us doesn't indicate the scale of the problem, and I'm particularly concerned about the number of applications that didn't include relevant information. I mean, how many of these, and do we have a list of these community transfer bodies that I can view?
Your mic's not on.
You're on mute, Councillor Andrea.
I'm always on mute. I think that was actually one of the issues that we raised, Councillor Sharkey, was that there wasn't a master list of all community asset transfer applications that we had received. So that area is being addressed by the service. Let me just have a quick. I'm just doing a quick check to see what it was to say they were doing around that. I think there was some form of asset transfer list, but the service agreed that it did need to improve upon in order to make it useful. So, I mean, I'm sure the service would be able to give you those details that you're requesting, Councillor Sharkey, if you needed them. So there is some sort of asset register available. So I'm happy to take that back to the service for you.
Well, I think that would be very important for everybody that's involved in this this committee. I mean, so a community asset, and in most cases, community assets will be being transferred from the council. So that is public assets are being privatised. Yet we don't have a full list of even the people who are asking to take these away from the council.
I actually see Joe's got his hand up. Sorry, I hadn't realised Joe was on the call. So Joe will probably want to come in on that one, Councillor Sharkey.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, convener. Yeah, I can assure the councillor that now there is a comprehensive list of community asset transfer applications on the community asset transfer section of the council's website, with a summary of the details there, and where we've got applications from community asset transfer bodies or proposals, then they're attached to that as well, councillor.
And I'm sure you'll send me the appropriate link, and I'm sure the IT will appropriately connect me to it. But how many people are on that comprehensive list, or organisations, sorry, are on that list?
But it's the list is by application, and there's I don't know, there's 20, 30. I'll get the list to you today, or the link to it today.
Yes, thanks very much. The list would be better. Sorry, there was some IT problems earlier which I'm referring to, which you might not know about. For that. So, in terms of the Act itself, I take it there's been a body of reports to councillors on its operation and its effects. I mean, where would I find those reports?
There's an annual report, councillors, which goes to ILE. I'll give you the reference to that. Not sure if it was last cycle or the one before, but normally we take any reports for actual transfers to ILE. For example, there's one for Howwood Park Pavilion this week, just recommending to elected members that we progress that community asset transfer application. So that goes to ILE, and there's an annual part of the Community Empowerment Act. There's a requirement to do an annual summary, and that I'm sure goes to ILE as well, but I'll confirm that to you.
Yeah, good. So thanks for the up-to-date information. A good question that occurs to me from what's been said here. So it's when did this list then become available? Because at the start of this meeting we're told that the master list didn't exist. So when was it actually made up?
No, I think the master list was there. It just wasn't presented in the way that our colleagues in audit, internal audit wanted, and quite rightly they brought that to their attention, and it's constantly being updated now. It is a live document on the council's website now, so anybody can go in and look at it, see what applications have been made in their area. There's also, I'll send you a link to the whole thing. There's also a link to what properties we have that community asset transfer bodies could consider making a community asset transfer application for. So there's a whole raft of information, and we give guidance on the Community Empowerment Act. The actual Act itself is accessible there as well. So there's a whole raft of information there that I'll send you a link to.
Right. So you said we give information on how to use the Community Empowerment Act. So is that your department that does that?
It is, but when I was saying we, I meant the council, because we link and give the Scottish Government Act in there as well, so we provide that link.
Right. So is that the staffing issue that was referred to in this report?
No.
That staff wasn't in place?
I'm not with you in terms of the question. All that information is there now. The updating of it and whatnot, yeah, we did have resource issues in trying to keep that as current as it should be. So,
no, but it specifically says in the management commentary that there were staffing issues within the team. So what's that staffing issue? Was it just a lack of staff? Was it a lack of training? What was the staffing issue?
The staffing issue is we've got, in the Asset and Estates team, we've got 3 senior asset and estate surveyors, 2 of whom were off long-term absent for a significant period during the last year.
Right, and it would normally be a surveyor's work to do this?
Yeah, a surveyor would lead on it, yeah. And then if we needed maps or whatnot, we would get the GIS guys to do the maps and the ownerships and that kind of detail. Right.
Well, as I said, I've not seen any, report on the operation of this particular act, come to councillors. And if you've got such a report, I'd be pleased to see it. But it seems to me that what's happened is that an act which, I mean, in front of us here, it's dated 2015, right? So why was it we weren't prepared to implement this act, right? With people who are tuned up and skilled, because the staff that were off sick, I mean, they were quite senior with us. They'd have started before 2015, wouldn't they?
Yeah, the Act was 2015, and then it came in by regulation. I don't have the date thereafter where we actually implemented it. But in fairness, Renfrewshire Council was one of the first in Scotland to have its own community asset transfer methodology, and other authorities in Scotland used our work on that. So even before the Act became implemented, we had a process for community asset transfer applications and process and whatnot, where we would give community groups leases and whatnot to suit their requirements, subject to board approvals.
And I'm glad you make that point, because I think that's the point I'm trying to make here, that we've had an act imposed on us that wasn't necessary, that we weren't prepared for, and we didn't get the money to cover it. And I think that's something that I've made points back in 2014, and any other opportunity I've had since. And I'm taking that opportunity again today. I mean, this was a waste of time, and we now find out that it's wasting our officers' time again, and it's an appalling act as far as I'm concerned, and backdoor privatisation. Anyway, I think that's the end of any political statement I wanted to make.
I'll get those documents to you today.
Thank you.
Councillor Begg.
Yes, can I go a little bit beyond the giving of the land to an independent body? Do we retain some form of title should that body become moribund and can no longer look after the land? Or can somebody step in and buy it and turn it into housing? What's the situation with respect to that, Joe?
The situation is that as part of a community asset transfer body's constitution, it has to say what's going to happen to it if and when it ever winds up. The normal process is that the assets would go to an organisation providing a similar function, another charity normally. But I should say that the community asset transfers, by implication, the name would suggest that it transfers. An awful lot of these community asset transfer applications are actually for a lease rather than for a full transfer of ownership of the land. But yeah, somewhere it is transferred the ownership, then it would go to an organisation. It's not sold off for house building or something like that. Or normally it would go to another charity, third sector organisation providing a similar service, or indeed possibly even come back to the council.
Okay, I feel a bit happier now. I've always wondered what the next stage was. I can see Jim's get his hand up. I'll pull out.
Councillor Sharkey.
Thanks. Just on that point, so to develop it, so would it be within the power of that organisation, if it had ownership of the land, to change the rules under which it passes on, to the community organisation or charity that you discussed? So it would be in its constitution or its memorandum and articles, but would it be within the power of that organisation to change that at some time down the future, in the future? So, for instance, 15 years from now, although they gave a promise, right, that they would never sell that land, if they have an AGM, change their rules which allow them to do that and then sell it, where would the council be then?
I don't have that crystal ball, Councillor, but what we can do is work in clawback. If we thought there was a value on a site and we were doing a transfer, we can put clawback in so that over a period of 10 years we get 10%, 20%, 30% reduction on the value of the site if they were able to sell it. But what you describe is a legal minefield, which fortunately we haven't come across to date.
Really?
It's in Renfrewshire, as far as I know.
Right, that was it. So there isn't any bowling club that was sold by Strathclyde Regional Council that isn't going to change its rules?
Not through the Community Empowerment Act. We didn't dispose. Sorry.
Again, making my point, right, that all these things again existed, right? The Community Empowerment Act does not, right, affect these, but again, does not affect these. So these assets can, and I predict will be passing out of the public, the charity and the third sector into private hands for the development use that Councillor Begg exactly says, and it's a nasty wee fig leaf, this act.
I can't comment. I can only comment on Andrea's report and how we've tried to address the shortcomings that we maybe had previously, and that's what we've tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
You had your same, Councillor Sharkey?
Oh yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? You're happy to pass the paper? Okay.
Sorry, that was my point, Chair. That I'm not happy to pass this paper, right, in the absence of the information that I've requested. So if you need me formally to ask that it be remitted, then I'll do that. But I certainly cannot allow this to pass without having seen the information asked for. Okay. Would you like to come in, Andrea?
I was just really, yeah, I'm not on mute. I was just really going to say the paper at the moment is for noting, and I think it's been minuted, the information that Councillor Sharkey is looking for.
Well, on that basis, then I'm happy to note it, so you're subject to getting the information I've requested.
Okay, we note your request. Okay, thank you. Item 2, internal audit and counter fraud progress.
That is myself again. This again is a normal report that you get on a quarterly basis. It just sets out our performance so far for the year, which at the moment we are still currently slightly ahead of target in relation to delivering the audit plan, and the remaining targets are also slightly ahead of target. We continue, like most other sections of the council, not all obviously, but most other sections in the council, to work from home remotely. That does put some difficulties in terms of getting all of the information that we need as quickly as we sometimes need it, but we are working with officers around that, and officers are being very supportive to get us the information that we need on a kind of remote basis. We haven't felt the need to make any further changes to the audit plan so far for the rest of the year. So we're just continuing with the changes that we put through during the last board. The counter fraud side of things, DWP work still hasn't been stood up, so we are working within the confines of the sort of council's work programme. We still are assisting with the track and trace side of things. One member of staff is picking that up periodically. It's not something that's using our sort of full resource for that person. So we do have her for a lot of the work, and indeed we are continuing to progress with the National Fraud Initiative. The data sets have all been delivered to the National Fraud Initiative secure website, and we are awaiting the results that are actually due to start coming in this month, and then we'll be starting to take a look at what that has thrown up for us. Our financial and non-financial outcomes are also listed as we usually do in this quarterly report. So I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has on the progress and performance report.
Any questions, anybody? Councillor Sharkey?
Sorry, thanks. It's just on page 19, 6.5. It says that applications, the ones that have been suspected fraudulent applications under the COVID-19 grant scheme, that they've been reported to the police. How many of them are there? And of those reported, out of a total, how many applications have we had? So how many applications, how many of them have been fraudulent?
Karen can keep me right, hopefully. I think there's 6 that we've reported to the police. What I can't answer for you today is how many we have processed. What I can say is it's significant, the number that have been processed, and that 6 represents a very tiny minority of what's been processed. I'm right, Karen, it was 6, wasn't it?
Yes, 6 applications, but that's over several companies. There's one person responsible for several companies that have been reported to the police. There is a couple that were out and out frauds. Out of the 6, that was the out and out fraud ones that, because of false bank accounts, etc., that were got in.
Right. Well, I'm sure we're not prejudging anything, but as you said, some of the cases have been egregious. But there would be a tiny percentage of the applications. I mean, when we say tiny, less than 1%.
I would say that is probably the case.
Right.
But I think I better come back to you with the number of applications versus the number that we have put to the police. But I would say, yes, you are talking a very small percentage.
Right. So it's what I'm trying to get to here is the actual scale of the problem. So in any application for funds that the private sector makes on grants that we apply, there always be a small degree of fraud. I mean, is this out of the ordinary? I think is what I'm saying.
It's not out of the ordinary. You would expect a small degree of fraud in any processing system. It's expected that a council tax system, for example, will contain an element of fraud. Our housing benefit system will contain an element of fraud, and it is just inherent within a grants process that it will contain an element of fraud. So we're involved with the team in trying to make that as secure as possible. But there was also balancing that against having to get the funds out to these organisations to keep them going. So in terms of what we have seen, either by refusing grants because they didn't have the correct information or appeared to be fraudulent and therefore not paid, and also some that did possibly get through the process, and then maybe further information has come to light which has highlighted those as being potentially fraudulent as well. It is still a very small percentage, but as I said, I will get the actual detail to you after the meeting, Councillor.
No, I'm very comfortable to hear that. It's important that these systems, right, as you say, which are in place to help a large number of people, aren't being held up by the unfortunate and dishonest few that that do take advantage of this, and while never approving of any fraud in these circumstances, I'm happy also to hear that it's certainly no more than at any other time.
No, it's not something that I would suggest is any more than we would have expected. I feel like it's difficult to say we would expect it, but
no, and I'm not trying to put those words into your mouth. It's just that I'm just as careful as you about it. It is thoroughly reprehensible that people do take advantage of public funds in that way when they see the opportunity. But I think we can safely have the assurance that that was made as difficult for those people as possible, right? Under this issue, without it necessarily affecting the people it was trying to help. I think in public service terms, it's one of the few times that we have to count that as a win. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments? No? Happy to accept the paper? Okay, thank you. Item 3, complaints data.
Thank you, Convener. This is the annual complaints report for this board, covering the time period of the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. The report provides a summary of our Council's procedure for complaints handling, the Council's 1920 overall performance. Also in Section 5, a breakdown of the volumes and responded to within target across each service, both for frontline and investigation complaints, whilst Appendix 1 provides some of the key SPSO indicators. In terms of the 1920 performance, I'd like to highlight a few points. There was a 3% slight decrease of complaints from 18 to 19. There was 86.8% of our complaints received last financial year were a frontline response. 72% of these frontline responses were responded to within the 5-day targets. And 87% of the investigations complaints were responded to within the statutory target of 20 days. For the 3 services where we have the average time periods of, the average time period for a frontline response was 3.3 days, and for investigation 13.3. So again, for those three services, well within those statutory targets. As you can also see, the volumes of the complaints reflects the nature of the services set out in the bar charts. So environment infrastructure received the highest volume of complaints, 79% of the overall complaints for 1920, which reflects the nature of that service in terms of the majority of frontline services, and thus an increase of the customer interactions that service faces. Section 4 of the report also sets out that the SPSO, Scottish Public Service Ombudsman, have also updated the national statutory model, and with an implementation date still set as April 2021. Some of the key changes are listed in the report, and as an organisation, we've already adapted a few of these across this current year into our new complaint system. Contact us. While Section 7 of the paper concludes the paper with how we've continued to improve the complaints procedure across the organisation over 1920, including implementing a new system, additional guidance being provided, and some communication materials being issued during the Learning at Work week in October. I'm happy to take any further questions. Thanks.
Andrew, your hand's up. Did you have another comment? And your mic's off again. Okay. Councillor Begg. Switch your mic on, please.
I'm suffering from the unable to press a button syndrome. I'm wondering what the definition of a complaint is. Is it when somebody says there's a dead cat lying on the road? Is that a complaint, or is that just something for people, or is it a complaint against an individual because they have been very rude to the if you like, the elector? What is the definition of a complaint?
Within Renfrewshire, we use the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman's definition of a complaint, which I think relates to the dissatisfaction of an organisation, a service being provided. And that's clearly set out in our complaints procedure policy and also in addition to our staff guides, but we use the statutory definition of a complaint.
So if we had a situation where one of my electors in my ward says that drain's always flooding, Councillor Begg, and I send this to Dorothy Kerr, what then would be the, would that be measured as a complaint, or is it just a piece of information for the council to do its job?
I know Dorothy's hands up, so she could respond probably directly to that complaint. But yes, if it is a dissatisfaction with a service we provide, so if that is repeated being flooded, then it should be classed as a complaint.
You happy with that response, Councillor Begg?
Yes, it's still a wee bit vague in my head, but I'm not going to pursue it.
Okay. Councillor Sharkey? Your microphone is off.
Well, I'm in good company, right, with that. So just to help Councillor, you're begging this matter, right? So you say that, an issue of information, right, if it's repetitive, right, will become a complaint. How many times does it have to be repeated before it does become a complaint?
I think obviously that would depend on the nature of the complaint, but certainly if it's a service request in terms of a street lighting failure that's been raised once, that should be as a service request. If a customer has raised it, I would say a couple of times, and is dissatisfied with the fact that the council has not reacted upon their requests, then it should be classed as a complaint, because the definition is a dissatisfaction. So if a customer has any dissatisfaction with the fact that we have not dealt with that repair or a gully or a matter, then it should be recorded as such as a complaint, as set out in the statutory model.
You happy with that, Councillor Sharkey? Your mic's off again.
No, I'm not actually happy with that, but I was giving way to Councillor Hood.
Councillor Hood.
Thank you. Can I ask a question, please? When a councillor makes a complaint, is that classed as a complaint or is that classed as an inquiry?
A complaint in terms of on behalf of a constituent, or a complaint from yourself?
Either, on behalf of the constituent or on behalf of himself.
Both should be recorded as a complaint on our systems. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Sharkey. No. Your mic's off.
Sorry, it was I'd left my hand up from the previous question.
Okay.
I'll just, since you've given me the opportunity to comment, I'll take advantage of it. Certainly the reason I said that I wasn't satisfied with the answer is because it leaves the decision, right, as to what is or is not a complaint in the hands of an officer, and I don't think that that's necessarily where we should leave this this matter. I understand Nicola's point about a couple of times, right, for that, but we are a big organisation, and one officer might only hear that particular issue once and they think that it's been dealt with, right? Then another officer in the same department deals with it, so you get to a situation where the constituent, right, is reported, and this happens to me frequently, the constituent has reported it 4 or 5 times, but when I speak to the department, the individual concerned has only heard about it once. I'm not saying that that didn't happen. What I'm saying is it's a factor of a big organisation, but it's no less frustrating and annoying for the constituent, because they've had to do it 4 or 5 times.
Would you like to come back on that, Nicola?
Well, no, just to obviously apologise about that, because it is a big organisation, so those things do occasionally happen. But yes, you're absolutely right, Councillor Sharkey. It will be frustrating for your constituent member if they have repeatedly raised a complaint and it's not dealt with. All I can assure is that the officers have got, those officers involved in complaints have received complaints training. They have also all the required, in terms of the complaints procedure, they have staff guides. And obviously there's a cohort of staff who are very familiar with the complaints policy, who can seek advice from each other on. And that's certainly what we do at the complaints working group as well. We've got a quarterly meeting, and we've also got members of officers who are also attendants at the National Complaints Forum. So we have got that support for officers, and the training and the materials, and following the policy and procedures, statutory nature for officers.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Happy to accept the report. Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is an exempt report. So all members of press and public should now vacate the meeting, and anyone else who's not involved, they're would like to carry on, miss the meeting, and they're welcome.